There are people in this world who don't just need help, they need you to feel responsible for them. And if you don't see that clearly, you can end up giving more and more of yourself thinking you're doing the right thing, while something else is actually happening. I just went through this, and it was subtle at first. It didn't look like manipulation, it looked like someone who needed help. A few days ago, someone I knew reached out to me. They were in a difficult situation, and naturally, I wanted to help. So I did. I sent a little bit of money. I know that was probably my first mistake. But then I said a little more and a little more. Nothing crazy. Just helping. And at that point, everything still felt clean. There was no tension, no resistance, just I'm helping someone who needs it. But what I didn't see yet was that something was starting to form underneath that. Not a request, but a pattern. And this is where most people miss it, because it doesn't show up all at once. It builds quietly. And if you've ever been in a situation where you start helping someone and then somehow you feel like you can't stop, even when something feels off, this is where it starts. At first, it was just simple help. But then the request started to change. It wasn't just, can you help me with this? It became, can you do this and this and this? And again, nothing extreme on the surface. The expectations started increasing. And this is where it gets subtle, because the requests don't feel unreasonable. They just start stacking. And at the same time, the tone starts to shift. It's no longer just appreciation. There's an underlying pressure that starts to creep in. Not direct, but implied. Things like, if you really care, if you're actually trying to help, this would mean a lot. And if you're someone who naturally cares, that lands. Because now it's not just about helping anymore. It's about what it says about you if you don't. And that's the shift. Most people don't catch it there because it still feels like you're choosing to help. But what's actually happening is that your help is starting to become expected. And once expectation is there, something else forms underneath it. You start to feel like if you don't show up, if you don't give a little more, something is off. Not just for them, but for you. And that's where it starts to turn. Because now you're not just helping someone, you're managing a feeling. And that feeling is guilt. Not loud guilt, not obvious guilt, just enough to keep you engaged. And then it crosses the line, not gradually, not subtly, but clear. The moment I stopped giving, the tone changed completely. It went from appreciation to accusation. Suddenly, I wasn't helpful anymore. I wasn't kind anymore. I was controlling, self-serving, not genuine. And that's the moment everything clicked for me, because nothing about my behavior had actually changed, except one thing. I stopped giving more. That's it. And when that one thing changed, their entire perception of me changed with it. That's not normal. That's someone responding to you as a person. Or that's not someone responding to you as a person. That's someone responding to your function. And in that moment, I realized something important. This was never just about help. This was about access to my time, to my money, access to my attention. And the tool being used to keep that access open was guilt. And once I saw that clearly, something interesting happened. The guilt evaporated. Not because I stopped caring, but because I could finally see what was real. I could see that they weren't dependent on me. They were trying to position me as responsible. And those two are very different things. Once you see that difference, you can't unsee it, because now you realize that you were never just helping, you were being pulled into a role. And the moment you step out of that role, the reaction tells you everything. So, what do you actually do with this? First, you have to understand what's happening, because this isn't just about one person. This is a pattern. When you're consistently available, when you keep responding, when you keep giving, something forms that most people never name: unspoken expectations. In my book, I talk about this as implicit contracts. Nothing is ever said out loud, but over time, it starts to feel like you're supposed to keep showing up. And the moment you don't, it feels like you broke something. Apparently, someone is Second Amendmenting out here. I don't know if you're done. This is from my book, Care Without Claim. Leadership After Leverage Stops Working. I'll just read the table of contents. Part 1, when care still works and why it feels good. The feeling of being needed. Shared opposition as a bond. Being recognized in the role. Care as responsiveness. When care tightens and no one names it. A subtle shift in tone. Explaining yourself more often. Discomfort with disagreement. Over availability. Loyalty tests that aren't spoken. Withholding as threat. Silence where response used to be. Part 3, loss of audience. Support falling away at the end of the banner. Grief without villains. Watching people choose elsewhere. Let me go back to page 57, discomfort with disagreement. The first time disagreement unsettled me, it surprised me. Not because disagreement was new, but because of how it landed. It didn't feel like challenge, it felt like disruption. Something loosening that I hadn't realized was being held together. The disagreement itself was mild, thoughtful even. It didn't attack the work or question my intentions. It simply introduced a different framing, one that didn't immediately reintegrate. I noticed my body react before my thoughts did. A tightening, a slight urgency to respond, not to win, but to restore, to bring the conversation back into alignment where it had previously moved with ease. That reaction was new. Earlier disagreements had felt generative. They added texture. They sharpened thinking. This one felt like it threatened coherence, not because it was wrong, but because it didn't slot cleanly into what already existed. I listened carefully. I stayed composed. Nothing in my response would have read as defensive. Still, something in me was unsettled. The discomfort wasn't about being challenged. It was about the effort required to absorb the challenge without altering the structure it touched. I could feel the difference between curiosity and containment. Curiosity opens, containment stabilizes. In that moment, I chose stability. Not deliberately, not consciously. I simply guided the conversation back towards familiar ground. The disagreement didn't disappear, it softened. It lost momentum. From the outside, the exchange likely looked respectful and resolved, but inside I noticed the cost. Disagreement had begun to register as something to manage rather than something to explore. Not because I feared it, but because it introduced variables the system was no longer built to hold easily. That realization didn't alarm me, it registered as information. Care was still present, respect was intact, nothing escalated, but the ease that once accompanied difference was gone. In its place was a subtle impulse to protect what was working, to keep the field steady, even if it meant smoothing over divergence before it could fully take shape. At the time, that felt prudent. Only later would I recognize how quickly disagreement can shift from being a source of insight to a source of instability, not because it's dangerous, but because the structure around it has grown tight enough to feel as such. Care narrows when primary. I was going to go into reading the next part, care that protects alignment. Care narrows when its primary concern becomes cohesion. In early stages, care widens the field. It invites difference, tolerates uncertainty, and allows ideas to move without immediate resolution. The system remains flexible because it has not yet optimized for stability. As alignment solidifies, care can take on a different role. Instead of supporting expansion, it begins to protect coherence. Attention shifts toward preserving shared orientation. Interventions are made not to explore difference, but to keep it from disrupting what already works. The shift is subtle. Care still listens, it still responds, but it listens with an ear for deviation. It responds with an eye towards reintegration. Difference is acknowledged, then gently guided back toward the center. From inside the system, this feels considerate. Disagreement is not shut down, it is softened. Complexity is not rejected, it is reframed. Care becomes the means by which divergence is absorbed without altering the underlying structure. Alignment is maintained not through force but through tone. Those offering care feel like they are being responsible, keeping conversations productive, preventing fragmentation, protecting what people rely on. Those receiving care feel understood, even when their difference does not persist. Over time, the range of expression contracts. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but those two sections of this book, Care Without Claim, they alternate. The first section was more of a first person view of what was going on. And the second part was like observation from outside, like second person or third person point of view. So I know it's the content can be difficult to digest, and that's why this is not one of the first books that I would recommend picking up. I would, but actually these two books I'm really proud of. This one is over 400 pages, called Authority Within, Learning to Discern Without Abandoning Faith. It has, I don't know, this might be controversial. It has chapters such as when structure replaces presence, money, measurement, and meaning, scripture, authority, and replacement, when insight arrives whole, why restraint is the test, prophecy without title, why belonging is needed, authority and the state, living with open questions, everyday discernment, teaching without teaching, when faith changes shape, living without replacement, ordinary fidelity, silence is completion, remaining human, and authority within. It's over 400 pages. I'll read the back cover. It says, most books about faith, authority, and meaning offer answers. This one stays with the moment before answers arrive. Authority Within explores what happens when certainty loosens, explanation pauses, and responsibility quietly returns. It does not argue against belief or tradition, and it does not offer a new system to replace them. Instead, it describes lived moments where discernment operates before language, where silence completes what words cannot, and where being fully human remains enough. This is not a book to agree with. It is a book to notice. And that's a common theme throughout my books. I just want people to notice, to observe, to be observers. This Normalization of Harm book is an important book as well. It's over 300 pages. But the back cover says, nothing dramatic happened. No rule was announced. No force was applied. And yet, over time, something shifted. The Normalization of Harm examines how pressure replaces force in the modern life, not through coercion or villains, but through care, coordination, tone, and quiet adaptation. It traces how people learn to manage themselves on behalf of systems that rarely need to speak, and how harm can accumulate without trauma, conflict, or intent. This is not a book about outrage, resistance, or reform. It does not argue a position or offer solutions. Instead, it maps patterns many people recognize but struggle to name. Voluntary compliance, internalized monitoring, emotional narrowing, and the subtle costs of always being reasonable. Written without urgency or intention, The Normalization of Harm invites readers to notice what has quietly become normal, and what that normalization may have required them to give up. It's a good book. Yeah. Anyway, there's another part in here where I talk about over-availability. When you're always on, always responding, always accessible, and it feels like care. But what it actually does is it trains people to expect you. And once expectation is there, guilt becomes the enforcement mechanism. Not because it's planned, but because it works. So the shift is simple. Not easy, but simple. You can care about someone without becoming responsible for them. You can help without being controlled. And you can say no without becoming a bad person. That's what care without claim actually looks like. It's not about shutting down. It's not about becoming cold. It's about staying clear while you care. Because the moment you stop trying to earn your value through helping, you become a lot harder to control. And what's interesting about this is not just what happened with that person, it's what happened in me. A few days ago, I was inside this, feeling the pull, trying to help, navigating the pressure, and now I'm sitting here able to see the entire pattern clearly, and that's something I don't take lightly, because that didn't come from this one situation. That came from a lot of time spent noticing things like this, writing about it, thinking about it, paying attention to where I get pulled and why. And this moment right here, this ability to step back and see it clearly, this is the actual shift. Not just saying no, not just setting a boundary, but seeing what's happening while it's happening. Because once you can do that, you're not stuck reacting anymore. You're choosing. And that changes everything. A lot of people go through situations like this over and over and over again, and they never quite see the pattern. They just feel drained, confused, or guilty. But when you can actually see it, you don't just get out of it. You actually grow from it. And for me, this just confirms something. All the work I've been doing, all the writing, all the time spent trying to understand this stuff, it's real because it showed up when it mattered. And that's what I'd want for anyone watching this. Not just to avoid situations like this, but to be able to see them clearly while you're in them. So, hey, thanks everybody for joining me in this video. I have physical copies of my books now. This is also a good one. The Crowd Inside You. No, that's not kinky. Most people think that crowds are something you join. They're not. They're something you enter intentionally. When certainty arrives too fast, when comfort replaces judgment, and when belief quietly begins to think for you, the crowd inside you explores the invisible transition, not through argument or ideology, but through lived internal experience. This book does not tell you what to believe. It shows you how belief forms, settles, and stabilizes until authorship disappears. Read slowly. It restores the ability to remain present without being carried, to agree without surrender, and to live among others without collapse. I have so many I want to share with you guys. So many. Like there's this book, Uncovered, How Discovery Made the Oregon Country Takeable. Most people think discovery is about finding something new. This book suggests something else. Uncovered examines discovery as a process of permission rather than arrival. How land, people, and relationships can be inhabited, named, measured, and still be considered undiscovered until they are rendered legible to authority. Without accusation or spectacle, this book traces how power often enters quietly through journals, maps, ceremonies, records, and delays that feel harmless in the moment and decisive later. It shows how control rarely begins with force and why peace often makes systems easier to build. You will not find grand villains here. You will not be told what to believe, and you will not be given conclusions to repeat. Instead, you may begin to notice how authority forms long before it starts to be enforced, and why some outcomes feel inevitable only in hindsight. This is not a book about conquest. It is about what happens before conquest ever becomes necessary. Very interesting read right here, because it's about something that actually happened, and from an angle that most people don't think about or even know, never find out. So I'm so excited that I actually have these things that I can actually, oh crap, I can actually hold them. It's my work. I can hold it. Look at this one. This one looks like a circuit board, right? It's called Capacity, Clarity Without Effort. And it's a quiet examination of what allows awareness to arrive without force. Rather than tracing a path of improvement or insight, this book observes how clarity emerges only when a system has enough capacity to hold experience without overload. There are no techniques offered and no conclusions demanded. What appears instead is a steady movement between recognition and awe, between understanding the structures that sustained life and honoring the fact that they did so long before they could be named. Written in short, modular movements, this book does not build toward a single answer or transformation. Some sections may feel immediately familiar, others may pass without impact. Both are intentional. This is not a guide for becoming something else, but a record of what remains once nothing needs to be fixed. It is for readers who are no longer seeking explanation and are beginning to notice what is quietly held all along. So this would be a book that would come after Nothing to Fix. This Quiet Accuracy is a book about discernment. I mean, I could go on. I'm gonna close this video for now, but I think that I will probably highlight a different book each week or something, you know. So, and if you're still with me here, we've been here for a half hour now. I really appreciate you, and I love hanging out with you. And I will be back very soon. And I'm going to schedule a live stream here soon as well, so that we can talk and interact in real time. All right. With that, I'm going to go for now. But thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you, and I enjoy talking with you. And have a great night, and I will see you soon. Peace.